focus stream elements. Do you think I'm doing the commercial now? Why are you doing another one? This is ridiculous. I mean, why do you do 3 minutes of ads and go right into another 3 minutes? Or am I just seeing things weird? This Twitch is telling me the ads are going now. I just played 3 minutes of ads. So we have 6 minutes of ads to start with? I mean, I literally played the 3 minutes of ads to not have the 3 minutes of ads come up automatically. I mean, that's just annoyingly repetitive. So are ads going right now? So did someone give Kel a subscription? Because her window wasn't showing ads. And her window wasn't even saying that ads are showing. Well, it's like mine, the ads are almost over for the second time. I'm gonna turn off that viewer thing. I don't need to see how many people here. Yeah, Twitch. Looks like it's showing 6 minutes of ads at the beginning of it. But at least it reset the pre-roll clock. But anyway, here I am talking to myself and I'm not even visible. It's Friday. So we're gonna do fairy tales. But we're gonna go to the bookstore first. I'm not even here. Where am I? Load. There I am. Hey. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the end of the first week of August. For those of you in Texas, this is a tax-free weekend for school supplies. I will probably look at more pens because I am a writing utensil addict. I wonder if I can get a discount on ink too. It doesn't really say. It says you get a discount on pens, but it doesn't say anything about ink. I can use more ink colors. Not that anyone here ever gets to see what I'm writing in color, because I've got several notebooks that I write in. And I write in different colors inks because I just got a massive pen collection. So if anyone gets really bored and just wants to throw me something on Throne, pens are good. I'd rather have the Scooby-Doo treats, or at least containers to put them in. Though the containers aren't really useful unless I have something to put in them. I posted those earlier today about my, free dog treats. I like them. I mean, they're not meaty, but they are like nice, firm, crisp graham cracker cookies, essentially. But they're thick and crunchy, and I like them. They're good for my dental hygiene. But no, not really. They aren't. I've got like 8 different colors of ink for my fountain pens. I draw with the fountain pens when I try to. So when I'm doing my storyboarding and whatnot, because I'm going to try to redo my starting screen, maybe my closing screen. Just animating text is a pain in the butt. I mean, I could do it on my tablets, but I would need a better tablet because my tablet doesn't really keep track of where my stylus pen is. And I don't want to try it on my phone because my phone's a little small for that kind of thing. And I've got my 10-inch Lenovo that, you know, I use for a second monitor when I need one. Because it's the only thing I have to use as a second monitor. Because I'm streaming on a laptop. But also mentioning that I'm streaming on a laptop, I do have the fundraising thing going on for, you know, the PC. If you follow me on Twitter, you probably get the ad post because I send the one from Grey Wolf and then I do the one for the books too. Which honestly, last time I checked, I still have not sold a single copy of Book 2. Kind of depressing. Let me look at that real quick. Has anyone purchased Book 2? No. Let me... Oh. It's only given me since the beginning of this month. I haven't sold any books at all this month. Let me just do Lifetime. Okay. That's not reassuring. In the lifetime of my book sales, I've only sold 18 copies. Well, those 18 of the copies on Amazon. Now, one person, well, I would say one person bought the artless cover of the first book, but I think that was probably me. So I've sold 16 copies of Book 1. Yeah, well, I'm glad I'm not having to survive on book sales because I would be dead. What did Richard Upton do? Drug scandal. Okay. Why do I have 3 different one of the quiz information things? Oh, it's because my stupid thing ran ads twice. But anyway, it's 9:08 and it is Friday. So you know what that means, kids. I haven't been drinking. No, that's not it. But it is time to skip over to the library. Okay, I will say, in my estate sale book hunting today, I actually found a 1939 copy of another book in the Andrew Lang series. I found Arabian Nights Entertainment. It is listed as part of the fairy book collection, so it will probably be on the fairy tale streams. And I do have other things I'll be working on. If you've seen my Twitter again, you've seen that I've been doing animation for topics, and I will be doing those individually on YouTube, because that would be a lot of stream time to do on here. And honestly, I wish I could get monetized on YouTube, but that requires 500 subscribers. I don't even have that many followers on here yet. You know what would be really awesome though? If everyone that followed me on not Twitch. No, honestly, yeah, if everyone followed me on Twitch, subscribed to me on YouTube, I'd have 353. If everyone who followed me on Twitter, or X, or no, it's always going to be Twitter. If they followed me everywhere, I'd be monetized by now. I've got, let me look, because I don't keep up. I have 831 followers on X, Twitter, whatever. If all of them just subscribe to me on YouTube, I'd be doing pretty damn well. And of course, I'd have to get the view times. What is my viewing schedule like right now? YouTube. Open up. Okay, dashboard. I have 91 subscribers on YouTube right now. Let's look at my analytics. Not that this really is a lot of importance or anything else, but lifetime. Okay. My channel has gotten 7,091 views, but only 654.2 hours of watch time. And I didn't even realize that my YouTube channel has existed since 2015. I didn't start putting my streams up. I didn't start streaming until 3 years tomorrow. That is right. I started streaming on Twitch. Hey, Alan! Nice of you to come in. I'm rambling about numbers. But eventually I'm going to switch over to the Yellow Fairy book. Numbers are nice. Not many of them are substantial, but yeah, they're nice. Let me switch over to my library real quick. Haha! Whoa! Why am I so short in my desk? I need to fix that. Where am I? It's this one. Sit up a little bit better. There we go. Alright, how's your week been? Why does it sound like a hairdryer? Hold on. Okay, what's my fan? My microphone's actually picking up. I guess I should have been pressed. What other fan am I hearing? Okay, that's the fan that's not even pointing this direction. That's like 6 feet away. Wow. I don't hear my library sounds going. Let's start those sounds over again. Okay. I wonder if my sound alerts are working. I didn't hear the one that's supposed to play when someone comes in. I hear that one. I actually recorded myself howling. I think I recorded that on my phone. I haven't done a live recording for a howl yet. Oh well. Anyway, as I said, we're doing fairy tales because I do those Friday nights. I did Rivals of Sherlock Holmes just last night. Ooh. What story did I start today? Ooh, Russian fairy tale. That's going to be interesting. Anyway. Get my water bottle over here. I wish I could find a way to pad my microphone stand just so it doesn't pick up me putting things on my desk. Hopefully when I get my new setup arranged, I won't have that problem as much. And maybe better air conditioning too. Anyway. Our first wonderful fairy tale for this Friday night. A Russian fairy tale. Folktale. I'm going to be working on classifications for that soon. Anyway. The Witch. Once upon a time, there was a peasant whose wife died, leaving him with 2 children, twins, a boy and a girl. For some years, the poor man lived on alone with the children, caring for them as best he could. But everything in the house seemed to go wrong without a woman to look after it. Seems legit. And at last he made up his mind to marry again, feeling that a wife would bring peace and order to his household and take care of his motherless children. So he married, and in the following years, several children were born to him, but peace and order did not come to the household. With more kids, For the stepmother was very cruel to the twins, and beat them and half-starved them, and constantly drove them out of the house. For her one idea was to get rid of them and get them out of the way. All day she thought of nothing but how she could get rid of them, and at last an evil idea came into her head, and she determined to send them into the great gloomy wood where a wicked witch lived. And so one morning, she spoke to them, saying, "You have been such good children that I'm going to send you to visit my granny, who lives in a dear little hut in the wood. You will have to wait upon her and serve her, but you will be well rewarded, for she will give you the best of everything." So the children left the house together, and the little sister, who was very wise for her years, said to her brother, "We will go and see our dear grandmother and tell her where our stepmother is sending us." And when the grandmother heard that they were going, she cried and said, "Oh, poor motherless children, how I pity you, and yet I can do nothing to help you. Your stepmother is not sending you to her granny, but to a wicked witch who lives in a great gloomy wood. Now listen to me, children. You must be civil and kind to everyone, and never say a cross word to anyone, and never touch a crumb belonging to anyone else. Who knows if, after all, help may not be sent to you." And she gave her grandchildren a bottle of milk and a piece of ham and a loaf of bread, and they set out for the great gloomy wood. When they reached it, they saw in front of them, in the thickest of the trees, a queer little hut, and when they looked into it, there lay the witch, with her head on the threshold of the door, with one foot in the corner and the other in the other corner, and her knees cocked up, almost touching the ceiling. "Who's there?" she snarled in an awful voice when she saw the children. They answered civilly, though they were so terrified that they hid behind one another, and said, "Good morning, Granny. Our stepmother has sent you to wait upon us." Strike that. "Our stepmother has sent us to wait upon you and serve you." "See what you do it well, then," growled the witch. "If I I'm pleased with you, I'll reward you. But if I am not, I'll put you in a pan and fry you in the oven. That's what I'll do with you, my pretty dears. You have been gently reared, and that you'll find my work hard enough. See if you don't." And so saying, she set the girl down to spin yarn, and she gave the boy a sieve in which to carry water from the well. And she herself went out into the wood. Now, as the girl was sitting at her distaff, weeping bitterly because she could not spin, she heard the sound of hundreds of little feet, and from every hole in the corner, mice came pattering across the floor, squeaking and saying, "Little girl, why are your eyes so red? If you want help, then give us some bread." And the little girl gave them bread that her grandmother had given her. Then the mice told her that the witch had a cat, and the cat was very fond of ham. If she would give her cat the ham, it would show her the way out of the wood, and in the meantime, they would spin the yarn for her. So the girl set out to look for the cat, and as she was hunting about, she met her brother, in great trouble because he could not carry water from the well in a sieve, as it came pouring out as fast as he put it in. And she was trying to comfort him. They heard a rustling of wings, and a flight of wrens alighted on the ground beside them. And the wren said, "Give us some crumbs, then we need not grieve, for you'll find that water will stay in the sieve." When the twins crumbled up their bread on the ground, and the wrens pecked it up, they chirruped and chirped, and when they had eaten the last crumb, they told the boy to fill up the holes in the sieve with clay, and then draw water from the well. So he did what they said, and carried a full sieve of water into the hut, without spilling a drop. When they entered the hut, the cat was curled up on the floor. So they stroked her and fed her the ham, and said to her, "Pussy, gray pussy, tell us how we're to get away from the witch." Then the cat thanked them for the ham, and gave them a pocket handkerchief and a comb, and told them that when the witch pursued them, as she certainly would, all they would have to do was throw the handkerchief on the ground and run as fast as they could. Because as soon as the handkerchief touched the ground, a deep, broad river would spring up, which would hinder the witch's progress. And if she managed to get across it, they must throw the comb behind them and run for their lives. For where the comb fell, a dense forest would spring up, which would delay the witch so long that they would be able to get away safely. Then the cat had scarcely finished speaking when the witch returned to see if the children had fulfilled their tasks. "Well, you have done well enough for today," she grumbled. "But tomorrow you'll have something more difficult to do. And if you don't do it well, you pampered brats, straight into the oven you go." Half dead with fright and trembling in every limb, the poor children lay down to sleep on a heap of straw in the corner of the hut, but they dared not close their eyes, and scarcely ventured to breathe. In the morning, the witch gave the girl 2 pieces of linen to weave before night, and the boy a pile of wood to cut into chips. Then the witch left them to their tasks and went out into the wood. As soon as she had gone out of sight, the children took the comb and handkerchief, and, taking one another by the hand, they started and ran and ran and ran. And first they met a watchdog who was going to leap on them and tear them to pieces. But they threw the remains of their bread to him, and he ate them and happily wagged his tail. Then they were hindered by the birch trees whose branches almost put out their eyes. But the little sister tied the twigs together with a piece of ribbon, and they got past safely, and after running through the wood, came out into open fields. In the meantime, in the hut, the cat was busy weaving the linen and tangling the threads as it wove, and the witch returned to see how the children were getting on, and she crept up to the window and whispered, "Are you weaving, my little dear?" "Yes, Granny, I'm weaving," answered the cat. When the witch saw that the children had escaped her, she was furious. Hitting the cat with a porringer, she said, "Why did you let the children leave the hut? Why did you not scratch their eyes out?" But the cat curled up on its tail and put its back up and answered, "I have served you all these years, and you never threw me a bone, but the dear children gave me their own piece of ham." Then the witch was furious with the watchdog and with the birch trees because they had let the children pass. But the dog answered, "I've served you all these years, and you never gave me so much as a hard crust, but the dear children gave me their own loaf of bread." And the birch rustled its leaves. "I have served you longer than I can say, but you never tied a bit of twine around my branches, and the dear children bound them up with their brightest ribbons." So the witch saw there was no help to be gotten from her old servants, and that the best thing she could do was to mount her broom and set off in pursuit of the children herself. As the children ran, they heard the sound of the broom sweeping the ground close behind them. So instantly they threw the handkerchief down over their shoulder, and in a moment a deep, broad river flowed behind them. When the witch came up to it, it took her a long time before she found a place that she could cross and could forward over with her broom. But at last she got across and continued the chase faster than before, and as the children ran they heard the sound, and the little sister put her ear to the ground and heard the broom sweeping the earth close behind them. So, quick as a thought, she threw the comb down on the ground, and in an instant, as the cat had said, a dense forest sprang up, in which the roots and the branches were so closely intertwined that it was impossible to force a way through it. So when the witch came up to it on her broom, she found that there was nothing for it but to turn around and head back to her hut. But the twins ran straight on until they reached their home. Then they told their father all that they had suffered, and he was so angry with their stepmother that he drove her out of the house and never let her return. But he and the children lived happily together, and he took care of them himself and never let a stranger come near them. Hey, Legacy! How you doing this evening? Pretty good, other than, hot. Any good stories lately? I have to turn my fan back on, it's just too hot. Background sound effects keep making me think about someone walking around here. So what have you been up to lately? Yeah, water is pretty good. No? What's been going on? Or has everything been going on? Oh. Yeah, that is definitely a lot. So did you find your dog, or is it still lost? Because I'm horrible at keeping up on Discord. Oh. Yeah, that is definitely a lot harder. I don't even want to think about how many furry kids I've lost. Well, loss has multiple meanings. It is a loss nonetheless. Ooh. Yeah, that's never good. I think the beagle I used to have was getting that at some point. That's been a couple of decades ago. As opposed to my cat, who just, well, I don't think about it. I think the longest I've had a cat's been 13 years, and one of the ones I have right now is 11. So I think I've done 11, an 8, and a 3. I think the oldest cat on record is probably at 25 now. So if a cat's living healthy, it's going to be around for a while. Yeah, I think it was a world record one. I think it only died maybe a year or two ago, but it was 25 when it died, so I'd say it did pretty good. I think the oldest dog that I've had was maybe 18. Yeah, he was fairly small. Well, he was fairly small. The other one before that was kind of small. My beagle, she lived to be about 13. So 13 seems to be my average for my own pets. The 18-year-old was my parents. Now, smaller dogs don't have to worry about arthritic pain and everything else quite as much as larger dogs do. Yeah, it's never easy for a kid to pass on, so. But anyway, yeah. Always nice to have something around that you can still give the love to. Feel free to relax or just leave them in the background if you want to listen to the stories. At least it'll help you relax a little. At least de-stress after everything. Get into my second story for the night. The Hazel-nut Child. There was once upon a time a couple who had no children, and they prayed to heaven every day to send them a child, though it were no bigger than a hazelnut. At last heaven heard their prayer and sent them a child exactly the size of a hazelnut, and it never grew an inch. The parents were very devoted to the little creature and nursed it and tended it carefully. Their tiny son, too, was as clever as he could be, and so sharp and sensible that all the neighbors marveled over how wise the things he said were. When Hazel-nut Child was 15 years old, and was sitting one day in an eggshell on the bed table beside his mother, she turned to him and said, "You are now 15 years old, and nothing can be done with you. What do you intend to be?" "A messenger," answered the Hazel-nut Child. Then his mother burst out laughing and said, "What an idea! You, a messenger! Why, your little feet would take an hour to go the distance of an ordinary person can do in a minute." But the Hazel-nut Child replied, "Nevertheless, I mean to be a messenger. Just send me a message, and you'll see that I shall be back in next to no time." So his mother said, Very well, go to your aunt in the neighboring village and fetch me a comb. The hazelnut child jumped quickly out of the eggshell and ran out into the street. Here he found a man on horseback who was just setting out for the neighboring village, and he crept up on the horse's leg and sat down under the saddle. And then he began to pinch the horse and to prick it with a pin. The horse plunged and reared, then set off at a hard gallop, which it continued in spite of its owner's efforts to stop it. When they reached the village, the hazelnut child left off pricking the horse, and the poor tired creature pursued its way at a snail's pace. The hazelnut child took advantage of this and crept down the horse's leg. Then he ran to his aunt and asked her for a comb. On the way home, he met another rider and did the return journey in exactly the same way. When he handed his mother the comb that his aunt had given him, she was much amazed and asked him, "But how did you manage to get back so quickly?" "Oh, Mother," he replied, "you see, I was quite right when I said I knew a messenger was a profession for me." His father, too, possessed a horse, which he often used to take out into the fields to graze. One day he took the hazelnut child with him. At midday, the father turned to his small son and said, "Stay here and look after the horse. I must go home and give your mother a message, and I shall be back soon." When his father had gone, a robber passed by and saw the horse grazing without anyone watching it, for of course he could not see Hazelnut child hidden in the grass. So he mounted the horse and rode away. But the hazelnut child, who was the most active little creature, climbed up the horse's tail and began to bite it on the back, enraging the creature to such an extent that it paid no attention to the direction the robber tried to make it go, but galloped straight home. The father was much astonished when he saw a stranger riding his horse, but the hazelnut child climbed down so quickly and told him all that had happened, and his father had the robber arrested at once and put into prison. One autumn, when the hazelnut child was 20 years old, he said to his parents, "Farewell, dear father and mother. I am going to set out into the world, and as soon as I become rich, I will return home to you." The parents laughed at the little man's words, but did not believe him for a moment. In the evening, the hazelnut child crept onto the roof where some storks had built their nest. The storks were fast asleep, and he climbed up on the back of the father stork and bound a silk cord around the joint of one of its wings. Then he crept away among its soft, downy feathers and fell asleep. The next morning, the storks flew towards the south, for winter was approaching. The hazelnut child flew through the air on the stork's back, and when he wanted rests, he bound his silk cord on the joint of the bird's other wing, so that it could not fly any further. In this way, he reached a country where the storks took up their abode close to the capital. When the people saw the hazelnut child, they were much astonished, and they took him with the stork to the king of the country. The king was delighted with the little creature and kept him always beside him, and he soon grew so fond of the little man that he gave him a diamond 4 times as big as himself. The hazelnut child fastened the diamond firmly under the stork's neck with a ribbon, and when he saw that the other storks were finally getting ready for their northern flight, he untied the silk cord from the stork's wing, and away they went, getting nearer to his home every minute. At length, the hazelnut child came to his native village. Then he undid the ribbon from the stork's neck, and the diamond fell to the ground. He covered it first with sand and stones, and then he ran to get his parents, so that they might carry the treasure home, for he himself was not able to lift the great diamond. So the hazelnut child and his parents lived in happiness and prosperity. After this, until they died. Well, that was short and sweet. Yeah. Definitely not a tall tale. This is why I put the whole stream VODs up as well as his individual stories so you can hear me commenting on stuff. Yeah. Anyway. Our next story for this wonderful Friday night of fairy tales. The story of Big Klaus and Little Klaus. In a certain village, there lived two people who both had the same name. Both were called Klaus, but one owned 4 horses, and the other only 1. In order to distinguish one from the other, the one who had 4 horses was called Big Klaus, and the one who had only 1 was Little Klaus. Now, you shall hear what befell both of them, for this is a true story. The whole week through, Little Klaus had to plow for Big Klaus and lend him his 1 horse. Then Big Klaus lent him his 4 horses, but only once a week, and that was on a Sunday. Hurrah! How loudly Little Klaus cracked his whip over the 5 horses, for they were indeed as good as his on his one day. The sun shone brightly, and all the bells in the church towers were pealing. The people were dressed in their best clothes and were going to church, with their hymn books under their arms, to hear the minister preach. They saw Little Klaus plowing with the 5 horses, but he was so happy that he kept cracking his whip and calling on, "Gee up, my 5 horses!" "You mustn't say that," said Big Klaus. "Only 1 horse is yours." But as soon as someone else was going by Little Klaus, he forgot that he must not say it, and he called out once more, "Gee up, my 5 horses!" "Now you had better stop that," said Big Klaus, "for if you say it once more, I will give your horse such a crack on the head that it will drop down dead on the spot." "I really won't say it again," said Little Klaus. But as soon as more people passed by and nodded him good morning, he became so happy in thinking how well it looked to have 5 horses plowing his field, that cracking his whip, he called out, "Gee up, my 5 horses!" "I'll see your horses," said Big Klaus, and seizing an iron bar, he struck Little Klaus's horse with such a blow that his head fell down and he died on the spot. "Alas, now I have no horse," said Little Klaus, beginning to cry. Then he flayed the skin off his horse and dried it and put it in a sack, which he threw over his shoulder and went into town to sell it. He had a long way to go and had to pass through a great dark forest. A dreadful storm came on, in which he lost his way, but before he could get on the right road, night came on, and it was impossible to reach the town that evening. Right in front of him was a large farmhouse. The window shutters were closed, but the light came through in chinks. "I should very much like to be allowed to spend the night there," thought Little Klaus, and he went and knocked on the door. The farmer's wife opened it, but when she heard that he wanted, she told him to go away. Her husband was not at home, and she took in no strangers. "Well, I must lie down outside," said Little Klaus, and the farmer's wife shut the door in his face. Close by stood a large haystack, Between it and the little old outhouse, covered with a flat thatch roof. "I can lie down there," thought little Klaus, looking at the roof. "It will make for a splendid bed. If only the stork won't fly down and bite my legs." For a live stork was standing on the roof, where it had its nest. So little Klaus crept up into the outhouse, where he lay down, and made himself comfortable for the night. The wooden shutters over the windows were not shut at the top, so he could just see into the room. There stood a large table spread with wine and roast meat and beautiful fish. The farmer's wife and the sexton sat at the table, but there was no one else. She was filling up his glass while he stuck his fork into the fish, which was his favorite dish. "If only I could get some of that," thought little Klaus, stretching his head toward the window. Ah, what delicious cakes he saw standing there. It was a feast. Then he heard someone riding along the road toward the house. It was the farmer coming home. He was a very worthy man, but he had one peculiarity, namely, that he could not bear to see a sexton. If he saw one, he was made quite mad. That was why the sexton had gone to say goodbye to the farmer's wife when he knew that her husband was not home. And the good woman therefore put the front in front of him the best food she had. But when they heard the farmer coming up, they were frightened. And the farmer's wife begged the sexton to creep up into the great empty chest. He did so, as he knew the poor man could not bear to see a sexton. His wife hastily hid all the food and the wine in the oven, for her husband had seen it. He would have been sure to ask. Oh dear, groaned little Klaus up in the shed when he saw the good food disappearing. "Is anybody up there?" asked the farmer, catching a sight of little Klaus. "Why are you lying up there? Come with me into the house." Then little Klaus told him how he had lost his way and begged to be allowed to spend the night there. "Well, certainly," said the farmer, "but first we must find you something to eat." The wife received them both very kindly, spread a long table, and gave them a large plate of porridge. The farmer was hungry and ate a good appetite, but little Klaus could not help thinking of the delicious dishes of fish and roast meats and cakes, which he knew were in the oven. Under the table at his feet, he had laid his sack with the horse skin in it, for, as we know, he was going to town to sell it. The porridge did not taste good to him, so he trod upon his sack, and the dry skin on the sack squeaked loudly. "Hush," said little Klaus to his sack, and at the same time treading on it again so that it squeaked even louder than before. "Hello, what have you got in your sack?" asked the farmer. "Oh, it's a wizard," said little Klaus. "He says we should not eat porridge, for he has conjured a whole oven full of roast meats, fish, and cakes." "Goodness me," said the farmer, and he opened the oven, and he saw the delicious, tempting dishes his wife had hidden there, but which now he believed the wizard in the sack had conjured for them. The wife could say nothing, but she put the food on the table at once, and they ate the fish and roast meat and cakes. Little Klaus now trod upon his sack, so the skin squeaked. "What does he say now?" asked the farmer. "He says," replied little Klaus, "that he has also conjured up 3 bottles of wine. They're standing in the corner by the oven." The wife had to fetch the wine which she had hidden, and the farmer drank and grew very merry. He would very much like to have had such a wizard as little Klaus had in his sack. "Can he conjure up the devil?" asked the farmer. I should like to see him very much, for I feel just now in very good spirits. Yes, said Little Claus. My wizard can do anything I ask. Isn't that true? He asked, treading on the sack so that it squeaked. Do you hear? He says yes. But that the devil looks so ugly that we should not like to see him. Oh, I'm not all afraid. What does he look like? He will show himself in the shape of a sexton. I say, said the farmer. He must be ugly. You must know that I can't bear the look of a sexton. But it doesn't matter. I know that it is the devil, and I shan't mind. I feel up to it now, but he must not come too near me. I must ask my wizard, said Little Claus, treading on the sack and putting his ear to it. What does he say? He says you can open the chest in the corner there, and you will see the devil squatting inside it. But you must hold up the lid so that he shall not escape. Will you help me hold on, then? Begged the farmer, going toward the chest where his wife had hidden the real sexton, who was sitting inside with a terrible fright. The farmer opened the lid a little way and saw him inside. Ugh! He shrieked, springing back. Yes, now I've seen him. He looks just like our sexton. Oh, it was horrid! So he had to drink again, and then drank far until the night. You must sell me the wizard, said the farmer. Ask anything you like, and I will pay you down a bushel of money on the spot. No, I really can't, said Little Claus. Just think how many things I can get from this wizard. I shouldn't like to have him so much, said the farmer, begging very hard. Well, said Little Claus at last, as you have been so good to give me a shelter tonight, I will sell him. You shall have the wizard for a bushel of money, but I must have a full measure. That you shall, said the farmer, but you must take the chest with you. I won't keep it an hour in my house. Who knows that he isn't in there still? Little Claus gave the farmer her sack with a dry skin, and got instead a good bushelful of money. The farmer also gave him a wheelbarrow to carry away his money and the chest. Farewell, said Little Claus, and away he went with his money and the big chest, wherein sat the sexton. On the other side of the wood was a large, deep river. The water flowed so rapidly that you could scarcely swim against the stream. A great new bridge had been built over it, on the middle of which Little Claus stopped, and said aloud so that the sexton might hear. Now what am I to do with a stupid chest? It is as heavy as if it was filled with stones. I shall only be tired dragging it along. I will throw it into the river. If it swims home to me, well and good. If it doesn't, it's no matter. And then he took the chest with one hand and lifted it up a little, as if he were going to throw it into the water. Oh, don't do that, called out the sexton from the chest. Let me out first. Oh, said Little Claus, pretending that he was still afraid. He is still in there. I must throw him quickly into the water to drown him. Oh, no, no, cried the sexton. I will give you a whole bushelful of money if you will let me go. Ah, well, that's quite another thing, said Little Claus, opening the chest. The sexton crept out very quickly, emptied the chest into the water, and went to his house, where he gave Little Claus a bushel of money. One he had already got from the farmer, and now his wheelbarrow full of money. Well, I've got a good price for the horse, he said to himself as he shook all his money out into a heap into his room. This will put Big Klaus in a rage when he hears how rich I've become through my one horse. But I won't tell him yet. So he sent a boy to Big Klaus to borrow a bushel measure from him. Now what can he want with it? Thought Big Klaus. And he smeared some tar at the bottom, so that whatever was measured a little should remain in it. And this is what had happened, for when he got his measure back, 3 new silver 5-shilling pieces were sticking to it. "What does this mean?" said Big Claus, and he ran off at once to Little Claus. "Where did you get so much money from?"
"Oh, that was from my horse skin. I sold it yesterday evening."
"That's certainly a good price," said Miss Claus. Running home in great haste, he took an axe, knocked all 4 horses on the head, skinned them, and went to town. "Skins! Skins! Who will buy skins?" he cried out through the streets. All the shoemakers and tanners came running to ask him what he wanted for them. "A bushel of money for each," asked Big Claus.
"Are you mad?" they all exclaimed. "Do you think we have money by the bushel?"
"Skins! Skins! Who will buy skins?" he cried again. And to all who asked what it cost, he answered, "A bushel of money." "Well, he's making a game of us," they said. And the shoemakers seized their yard measures, and the tanners with their leather aprons, and they gave Big Claus a good beating. "Skins! Skins!" they cried mockingly. "Yes, we tan your skin for you. Out of the town with him!" They shouted, and Big Claus had to hurry off as quickly as he could, if he wanted to save his skin. "Aha!" he said when he came home. "Little Claus shall pay dearly for this. I will kill him." Little Claus's grandmother had just died. Though she had been very unkind to him, he was very much distressed, and he took the dead woman and laid her in his warm bed to try to see if he could not bring her back to life. There she lay the whole night, while he sat in the corner and slept on a chair, which he had done often before. And in the night, as he sat there, the door opened, and Big Claus came in with his axe. He knew quite well where Little Claus's bed stood, and going up to it, he struck the grandmother on the head, just where she was going to be. "There," he said. "Now you won't get the best of me again." And he went home.
"What a very wicked man," thought Little Claus. "He was going to kill me. It's a good thing my grandmother that she was already dead, or else he would have killed her."
Then he dressed his grandmother in her Sunday clothes, borrowed a horse from his neighbor, and harnessed the cart to it. He set his grandmother on the back seat so that she would not fall out when he drove, and away they went. When the sun rose, they were in front of the large inn. Little Claus got down and went in to get something to drink. The host was very rich, and he was worthy, but a hot-tempered man.
"Good morning,"
he said to Little Claus. "You're early on the road."
"Oh, yes," said Little Claus. "I'm going to town with my grandmother. She's out sitting in the cart, and I cannot bring her in. Will you go give her a glass of mead? But you'll have to speak loud, for she is very hard of hearing."
"Oh, yes, I certainly will," said the host. And pouring out a large glass of mead, he took it out to the dead grandmother, who was sitting upright in the cart. "Here's a glass of mead from your son," said the host, but the dead woman did not answer a word, and sat still. "Don't you hear?" he cried, the host, as loud as he could. "Here's a glass of mead from your son." And then he shouted the same thing again, and yet again, but she never moved from her place. At last he grew angry and threw the glass at her face, so that she fell back into the cart, for she was not tied in place. "Hello!" cried Little Claus, running out the door and seizing the host by the throat. "You have killed my grandmother! Look, there's a great hole on her forehead!" "What a misfortune!" cried the host, wringing his hands. "It all comes from my hot temper. Dear Little Claus, I will give you a bushel of money and will bury your grandmother if she were my own. Only don't tell about it, or I shall have my head cut off.
and that would be very uncomfortable.
So Little Claus got a bushel of money, and the host buried his grandmother as if she had been his own. Now when Little Claus reached home with so much money, he sent his boy to Big Claus to borrow his bushel measure. "What's this?" said Big Claus. "Didn't I kill him? I must see for myself." So he went himself to Little Claus with the measure. "Well now, where did you get all this money?" he asked, opening his eyes at the heap.
You killed my grandmother, not me, said Little Claus. I sold her and got a bushel of money for her.
"That is indeed a good price," said Big Claus, and hurrying home, he took an axe and killed his grandmother. Later in the cart, and drove off to the apothecary's, and asked whether he wanted to buy a dead body.
Who is it, and how did you get it? Asked the apothecary.
"It is my grandmother," said Big Claus. "I killed her in order to get a bushel of money."
You are mad, said the apothecary. Don't mention such things, or you will lose your head.
And he began to tell him what a dreadful thing he had done, and what a wicked man he was, and that he ought to be punished, till Big Claus was so frightened that he jumped into the cart and drove home as hard as he could. The apothecary and all the people thought he must be mad, so they let him go. "You shall pay for this," said Big Claus as he drove home. "You shall pay for this dearly, Little Claus." As soon as he got home, he took the largest sack he could find and went to Little Claus and said, "You have fooled me again. First I killed my horses, then my grandmother. It is all your fault, and you shan't do it again." And he seized Little Claus and pushed him in the sack and threw it over his shoulder, crying out, "And now I'm going to drown you." He had to go a long way before he came to the river, and Little Claus was very light. The road passed by a church, and the organ was sounding, and the people were singing most beautifully. Big Claus set the sack down with Little Claus in it by the church door, and thought he might as well go in and hear a song before going on further. Little Claus could not get out, and everybody in the church, so he went in. "Oh dear," groaned Little Claus in the sack, twisting and turning himself. But he could not undo the string. There came by an old shepherd with snow-white hair and a long staff in his hand. He was driving a herd of cows and oxen, but he pushed it against the sack so that it overturned.
"Alas,"
moaned Little Claus,
"I am so young, and yet I must die."
"And I, poor man," said the cattle driver, "I am so old and yet cannot die."
"Open the sack," called Little Claus. "Creep in here instead of me, and you will die in a moment."
"I will gladly do that," said the cattle driver, and opened the sack, and Little Claus struggled out at once. "You will take care of the cattle, won't you?" asked the old man, creeping into the sack, which Little Claus fastened up, and then he went on with the cows and oxen. Soon after, Big Claus came out of the church, and taking up the sack on his shoulders, it seemed to him as if he had become lighter, for the old cattle driver was not half as heavy as Little Claus. "How easy he is to carry now. That must be because I heard part of the service." So he went on to the river, which was deep and broad, and threw the sack in with the old driver, and called after it, for he thought Little Claus was inside. "Down you go! You won't mock me any more now!" And then he went home. But when he came to the crossroads, there he met Little Claus, who was driving his cattle. "What's this?" said Big Claus. "Haven't I drowned you?"
"Yes," replied Little Claus. "You threw me in the river a good half-hour ago."
"But how did you get those splendid cattle?" asked Big Claus.
"Oh, they're sea cattle,"
said Little Claus.
I'd tell you the whole story and thank you for having drowned me, because now I'm on dry land and really rich. How frightened I was when I was in the sack, how the wind whistled in my ears and threw me off the bridge into the cold water. I sank at once to the bottom, but I did not hurt myself, for underneath was growing the most beautiful soft grass. I fell on this and immediately the sack opened. The loveliest maiden in snow-white garments with a green garland round her wet hair took me by the hand and said, "Ah, you little Klaus, here are some cattle for you to begin with, and a mile farther down the road there is another herd, which I will give you as presents." Now that I saw the river was great high road for the sea people. Along it, travel underneath to the sea and to the land where the river ends. It was so beautiful, so full of flowers and fresh grass. The fishes which were swimming in the water shot past my ears as birds do in the air up here. What lovely people they were, and what fine cattle were grazing in the ditches and dikes.
"But why did you come up to us again?" asked Big Klaus. "I should not have done so, if it is so beautiful down there."
"Well," said Little Klaus, "that was just politic of me. You heard what I told you, that the sea maiden said to me a little mile further down the road, and by that she meant the river. But you can go to no other way. There is another herd of cattle waiting for me, but I know what windings the river makes, now here, now there, so that it's a long way around. Therefore it makes it such shorter to come on land and drive across the field to the river. Thus I have spared myself quite half a mile, and have come quicker to my sea cattle."
"Oh, you're a lucky fellow," said Big Klaus. "Do you think I should go get some cattle if I went to the bottom of the river?"
"Oh, yes, I think so," said Little Klaus. "But I can't carry you in a sack to the river. You are too heavy for me. If you'd like to go there yourself, then creep into a sack, and I will throw you into with the greatest pleasure."
"Thank you," said Big Klaus. "But if I don't get any sea cattle when I come there, you will have a good hiding, mind you."
"Oh, no, don't be so hard on me."
Then they went to the river, and when the cattle, which were thirsty, caught sight of the water, they quickly ran so they could drink.
"Look how they're running," said Little Klaus. "They want to go to the bottom again."
"Yes, but help me first," said Big Klaus, "or else you shall have a beating." And so he crept into a large sack which was lying on the back of one of the oxen. "Put a stone in, for I'm afraid I might not reach the bottom," said Big Klaus.
"It goes all right," said
Little Klaus, and he laid a big stone in the sack, fastened it up tight, and then pushed it in. Plump! There went Big Klaus into the water, and he sank like lead to the bottom.
"I doubt he will find any cattle,"
said Little Klaus, as he drove his own home. Hi, Guilty! Congrats on getting first. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and run the ads now since I had to push them back, so feel free to hang around. I've had another story like that, almost exactly like that, except it was about a tailor. A very lucky tailor, I think. Yeah, but in which U.S. state did the infamous outlaw duo Bonnie and Clyde meet their end? Texas. Anyway, how's your evening been, Guilty? Why is my model being slow? Okay, much better. Let's say, I have another follower. Oh, yeah, never mind. Oh, and then the duck. Yeah. Okay, which ads are running? Because I'm kind of curious. Why am I hearing ads? Never mind, that's someone else's stream. Okay, another minute and 10 seconds left. It's 10:17 by my computer's time, anyway. Let's see what's the next story. Next story. Prince Ring. Oh, it's Icelandic. Cool. That'd be interesting. Not sure who can hear it because of the ads, but I'm doing just like I'm gonna watch a movie tomorrow on stream because it's technically my 3rd anniversary of streaming. So if you want to come by and hang out, I'll probably post something about it before I start. That's the only thing I really have planned. Other than Louisiana. Okay, no. Where in Louisiana was it? Where in Louisiana did Bonnie and Clyde die? Yenville Parish. Okay, so near South Louisiana. I think the car is in a casino somewhere. With a lot of holes in it. Okay. Anyway, welcome back from the ads. And we will get into our next story. I said this one's apparently an Icelandic tale. Anyway, our next story for this wonderful Friday night of folk and fairy tales. Prince Ring. Once upon a time there was a king and his queen in their kingdom. They had one daughter who was called Ingeborg, and one son whose name was Ring. He was less fond of adventurers than men of rank usually were in those days, and he was not famous for strength or feats of arms. When he was 12 years old, one fine winter he rode into the forest along with his men to enjoy himself. They went on a long way until they caught sight of a hind with a golden ring in its horns. The prince was eager to catch it, if possible, so they gave it chase and rode on without stopping until all the horses began to flounder beneath them. At last the prince's horse gave way too, and then there came over them a darkness so black they could no longer see the hind. By the time they were far away from any house, and thought that it was high time to be making their way home again, but they found they had got lost. At first, they all kept together, but soon each began to think that he knew the right way was best, so they separated, and they all went in different directions. The prince, too, had got lost like the rest and wandered on for a time until he came to a little clearing in the forests not far from the sea, where he saw a woman sitting on a chair and a big cask standing beside her. The prince went up to her and saluted her politely, and she received him very graciously. He looked down into the cask then, and saw lying at the bottom an unusual, beautiful golden ring, which pleased him so much that he could not take his eyes off it. The woman saw this, and said he might have it if he would take the trouble to get it, for which the prince thanked her, and said it was at least worth trying. So he leaned over the cask, which did not seem very deep, though he would easily reach the ring. But the more he reached down to get after it, the deeper grew the cask. As he was thus bending into it, the woman suddenly rose and pushed him in head first, saying that he was now to take up his quarters there. Then she fixed the top of the cask and threw it out into the sea. The prince thought himself in a fairly bad plight now, as he felt the cask floating out from the land and tossing about on the waves. How many days he spent, he could not tell, but at last he felt that the cask was knocking against rocks. At least he was a little cheered, thinking that it was probably land and not merely a reef in the sea. Being something of a swimmer, he at least made up his mind to get the bottom out of the cask, and having done so, he was able to get out on the shore, for the rocks by the sea were smooth and level. But overhead there were high cliffs. It seemed difficult to get up there, but he went along the foot of them for a little while, till he at last tried to climb up, which at last he did. Having got to the top, he looked around him and saw that he was on an island, which was covered with forest, with apples growing, and altogether pleasant as far as the land was concerned. After he had been there for several days, he heard one day a great noise from the forest, which made him terribly afraid, so that he ran to hide himself among the trees. Then he saw a giant approaching, dragging a sled loaded with wood, making straight for him, so that he could see nothing for it but to lie down just where he was. When the giant came across him, he stood still and looked at the prince for a little. Then he took him up in his arms and carried him home to his house, and was exceedingly kind to him. He gave him to his wife, saying he had found this child in the wood, and she would have it to help her in the house. The old woman was greatly pleased and began to fondle the prince with the utmost delight. He stayed there with them, and was very willing and obedient to them in everything, while they grew kinder to him every day. One day the giant took him around and showed him all the rooms, except the parlor. This made the prince curious to have a look into it, thinking there must be some great rare treasure there. So one day, when the giant had gone into the forest, he tried to get into the parlor and managed to get the door open halfway. Then he saw that some living creature moved inside and ran along the floor towards him and said something, which made him so frightened that he sprang back from the door and shut it again. As soon as the fright began to pass off, he tried again, for he thought it would be interesting to hear what it said, but things just went as before with him. Then he got angry with himself, and summoning up all his courage, he tried for a third time, and opened the door of the room and stood firm. And then he saw that it was a big dog, which spoke to him and said, "Choose me, Prince Ring." The prince went away rather afraid, thinking with himself that no great treasure at all, but all the same what it said to him stuck in his mind. It was not said how long the prince stayed with the giant, but one day the latter came to him, and he would now take him over to the mainland of the island, for he himself had no long time to live. He also thanked him for his good service and told him to choose someone of his possessions, where he would get whatever he wanted. Ring thanked him gratefully and said there was no need to pay him for his services, as they were so little worth. But if he did wish to give him anything, he would choose what was in the great parlor. The giant was taken by surprise and said, "There, you chose my old woman's right hand, but I did not break my word." Upon this, he went to get the dog, which came running with signs of great delight. But the prince was so much afraid of it that it was all he could do to keep from showing his alarm. After this, the giant accompanied him down by the sea, where he saw a stone boat, which was big enough to hold two of them and the dog. On reaching the mainland, the giant took a friendly farewell to Ring, and told him he might take possession of all that was on the island after he and his wife died, which would happen within 2 weeks of that time. The prince thanked him for this, and for all his other kindness, and the giant returned home, while Ring went up some distance from the sea, but he did not know what land he had come to, and was afraid to speak to the dog. After he had walked on in silence for a time, the dog spoke to him and said, "You don't seem to have much curiosity, seeing you never asked me my name." The prince then forced himself to ask, "What is your name?" "You had best call me Snatty Snatty," said the dog. "Now we are coming up to a king's seat, and you must ask the king to keep us all winter, and to give you a little room for both of us." The prince now began to be less afraid of the dog. They came to the king and asked him to keep them all winter, to which he agreed. When the king's men saw the dog, they began to laugh at it, and make as if they would tease it. But when the prince saw this, he advised them not to do it, or they might have the worst of it. They replied that they didn't care a bit what he thought. After Ring had been with the king for some days, the latter began to think there was a great deal in him, and esteemed him more than the others. The king, however, had a counselor called Red, who became very jealous when he saw how much the king esteemed Ring. And one day they talked to him, and said he could not understand why he had such a good opinion of this stranger, who had not yet shown himself superior to the other men in anything. The king replied that it was only a short time since he had come there. Red then asked him to send them both down to cut wood the next morning, and see which of them would do the most work. Snatty Snatty heard this and told it to Ring, advising him to ask the king for 2 axes, so that he might have one in reserve he had first broken. The next morning, the king asked Ring and Red to go down to cut trees for him, and both agreed. Ring got the 2 axes, and each went its own way, but when the prince got into the wood, Snatty took one of the axes and began to hew along with him. In the evening, the king came to look over their day's work, as Red had proposed, and found that Ring's wood heap was twice as big. "I suspect," said the king, "that Ring is not quite useless. Never have I seen such a day's work." Ring was now in far greater esteem with the king than before, and Red was all the more discontented. One day he came to the king and said, "If Ring is such a mighty man, I think you might ask him to kill the wild oxen in the wood there, and flay them the same day, and bring you the horns and the hides in one evening." "Don't you think that is a desperate errand?" said the king, "seeing they are so dangerous and no one has yet ventured to go against them." Red answered that he only had one life to lose, and it would be interesting to see how brave he was. Besides, the king would have good reason to ennoble him if he overcame them. The king at last allowed himself, though rather unwillingly, to be won over by Red's persistency, and one day asked Ring to go and kill the oxen that were in the wood for him, and bring their horns and hides to him that evening. Not knowing how dangerous the oxen were, Ring was quite ready and went off at once, and to the great delight of Red, who was now sure of his death. As soon as Ring came in sight of the oxen, they came bellowing to meet him. One of them was tremendously big, and the other rather less. Ring grew terribly afraid. "How do you like them?" asked Snatty. "Not well at all," said the prince. "We can do nothing else," said Snatty, "than attack them. If it is to go well, you will go against the little one. I shall go against the larger." With this, Snatty leapt at the big one, and was not long in bringing him down. Meanwhile, the prince went against the other with fear and trembling. About the same time, Snatty came to help him with the ox, had nearly got him under, but Snatty was not slow in helping his master to kill it. Each of them began to flay their own ox, but Ring was only halfway through the time that Snatty had finished his. In the evening, after they had finished the task, the prince thought himself unfit to carry all the horns and both the hides, so Snatty told them to lay them on his back until they got to the palace gates. The prince agreed and laid everything on the dog, except the skin of the smaller ox, which he staggered along with himself. At the palace gate, he left everything lying, and went before the king and asked him to come at length with him, and there handed him over the hides and the horns of the oxen. The king was greatly surprised at his valor, and said he knew no one like him, and thanked him heartily for what he had done. After this, the king set Ring next to himself, and all esteemed him highly, and held him to be a great hero, nor could Red any longer say anything against him, though he grew still more determined to destroy him. One day a good idea came into his head. He came to the king and said something to say to him. "Well, what is it?" said the king. Red said that he had just remembered a gold cloak, gold chessboard, and a bright gold piece that the king had lost about a year before. "Ugh, don't remind me of them," said the king. Red, however, went on to say that since Ring was such a mighty man that he could do everything, it occurred to him that he to advise the king to ask him to search for these treasures, and to come back with him before Christmas. In return, the king should promise him his daughter. The king replied that he thought it altogether unbecoming to propose such a thing to Ring, seeing that he could not tell him where the things were. But Red pretended not to hear the king's excuses, and went on talking about it until the king gave in to him. One day, a month or so before Christmas, the king spoke to Ring, saying that he wished to ask a great favor of him. "What is that?" asked Ring. "It is this," said the king, "that you find me my gold cloak, my gold chessboard, and my bright gold piece. They were stolen from me about a year ago. If you can bring them to me before Christmas, I will give you my daughter in marriage." "Where am I to look for them, then?" said Ring. "That you must find out for yourself," said the king. "I don't know." Ring now left the king and was very silent, for he saw that he was in a great difficulty. But, on the other hand, he thought it was an excellent to have a chance of winning the king's daughter. Snatty noticed that his master was at a loss, and said to him that he should not disregard what the king had asked him to do, but he would have to act upon his advice, otherwise he would get into great difficulties. The prince assented to this, and began to prepare for the journey. After he had taken leave of the king, and was setting out on the search, Snatty said to him, "Now you must go about the neighborhood, and gather as much salt as ever you can." The prince did so, and gathered so much salt that he could hardly carry it. But Snatty said, "Throw it on my back," which he accordingly did. And the dog ran over before the prince until they came to a great foot of a steep cliff. We must go up there, said Snatty. I don't think that will be child's play, said the prince. Just hold fast to my tail, said Snatty. And in this way he pulled Ring up to the lowest shelf of the rock. The prince began to get giddy, but went up Snatty to the second shelf. Ring was nearly swooning by this time, but Snatty made a third effort and reached the top of the cliff, but the prince fell down in a faint. After a little, however, he recovered again, and they went a short distance along a level plain until they came to a cave. This was on Christmas Eve. They went up above the cave and found a window in it, through which they had looked, and saw 4 trolls lying asleep beside a fire, over which a large porridge pot was now hanging. Now you must empty all the salt into the porridge pot, said Snatty. Ring did so, and soon the troll was awakened. The old hag, who was the most frightful of them all, went first to taste the porridge.
How comes this? She said. This porridge is salt. I got the milk by witchcraft yesterday out of 4 kingdoms, and now it is salt?
All the others came to taste the porridge, and thought it nice, but after they had finished it, the old hag grew so thirsty that she could stand it no longer, and asked her daughter to go out to bring some water from the river that ran nearby.
I won't go, she said, unless you lend me your bright gold piece. Though I should die, you shan't have it, said the hag. I'll die then, said the girl. Well then, take it, you brat, said the old hag, and be off with you, and make haste with the water.
The girl took the gold and ran out with it, and it was so bright that it shone over the plain. As soon as she came to the river, she lay down to take a drink of the water. But meanwhile, the 2 of them had got down off the roof and thrust her head first into the river. The old hag began to long for the water, and said the girl would be running about the gold piece all over the plain, and so she asked her son to go and get her a drop of water. I won't go, he said, unless I get the gold cloak.
Then I should die. You shouldn't have it, said the old hag.
You die then, said the son.
Well then, take it, said the old hag, and be off with you, but you must make haste with the water.
He put on the cloak, and when he came outside, it shone so bright that he could see to go with it. On reaching the river, he went to take a drink like his sister. At that moment, Ring and Snatty sprang upon him and took the cloak from him and threw him into the river. The old hag could stand the thirst no longer, and asked her husband to go to get a drink for her.
The brats, she said, were of course running about and playing themselves, and she had expected that they would, the little wretches that they were.
I won't go, said the old troll, unless you lend me the gold chessboard.
Though I should die, you shan't have it, said the hag.
I think you may as well do that, since you won't grant me such a little favor.
Take it then, you utter disgrace, said the old hag, since you are just like those 2 brats.
The old troll went out with the gold chessboard, and went down to the river, and was about to take the drink when Ring and Snatty came upon him, took the chessboard from him, and threw him into the river. Before they got back again, however, up on the top of the cave, they saw the poor old fellow's ghost come marching up from the river. Snatty sprang upon him at once. Ring assisted in the attack, and after a hard struggle they had mastered him a second time. When they got back to the window, they saw that the old hag was moving towards the door. Now we must go at once, said Snatty, and try to master her there. Or if she gets out, we shall have no chance with her. She is the worst witch that ever lived, and cast no iron can cut her. One of us must pour boiling porridge out of the pot on her, and the other punch her with a red-hot iron. Dang. And they went, and no sooner did the hag see them than she said, So you have come, Prince Ring. You must have seen my husband and children.
Snatty saw that she was about to attack them and sprang at her with a red-hot iron poker from the fire, while Ring kept pouring boiling porridge over her without stopping. And in this way, they at last got her killed. Then they burned the old troll and her to ashes and explored the cave, where they found plenty of gold and treasures. The most valuable of these they carried with them as far as the cliff, and left them there. Then they hastened home to the king with his 3 treasures, where they arrived late on Christmas night, and Ring handed them over to him. The king was beside himself with joy, and was astonished at how clever a man Ring was in all kinds of feats, so that he esteemed him still more highly than before, and betrothed him to his daughter. And the feast for this was last all Christmastide. Ring thanked the king courteously for this and all his other kindnesses, and as soon as they had finished eating and drinking, they went off to fall asleep in his own room. Snatty, however, asked permission to sleep in the prince's bed for the night, while the prince should sleep where the dog usually laid. Ring said that he was welcome to do so, that he deserved more from him than came to him. So Snatty went up to the prince's bed, and after a time came back, and told Ring that he could go there himself now, but to take care not to meddle with anything that was in the bed. Okay. Now the story comes back to Red, who came into the hall and showed the king his right arm, wanting the hand. And now that he could see what kind of man his intended son-in-law was, he was done to do this without him cause any harm. The king became very angry, and said that he would soon find out the truth about this, and if Ring had cut his right hand without good cause, he should be hanged. But if it was otherwise, then Red should die. So the king sent for Ring, and asked him for what reason he had done this. Snatty, however, had just told Ring what had happened during the night, and in reply he asked the king to go with him, and he should show him something. The king went with him to the sleeping room, and saw lying on the bed a man's hand holding the sword. "This hand," said Ring, "came over the partition during the night, and was about to run me through in my bed if I had not defended myself." The king answered that in this case he could not blame him for protecting his own life, and that Red was well worthy of death. So Ring was hanged. No, Red was hanged, sorry. So Red was hanged, and Ring married the king's daughter. The first night that they went to bed together, Snatty asked Ring to allow him to lie at their feet, and this Ring allowed him to do. During the night he heard a howling and an outcry beside him. He struck a light near her and saw a dog's ugly old skin lying next to him, and a beautiful prince in the bed. Ring instantly took the skin and burned it, and then shook the prince, who was lying unconscious, until he woke up. The bridegroom then asked his name, then replied that he was called Ring, and that he was a king's son. In his youth, he had lost his mother, and in her place his father had married a witch, who had laid a spell on him that he should return to a dog, and never be released until a prince of the same name had allowed him to sleep at his feet the first night of his marriage. He added further, "As soon as she knew that you were my namesake, she tried to get you destroyed, so that you might not free me from the spell. She was the hind that you and your companions chased. She was the woman you found in the clearing at the task, and the old hag that we just now killed in the cave." After the feasting was over, the 2 namesakes, along with other men, went to the cliff, and brought all the treasure home to the palace. Then they went to the island and removed all that was valuable from it. Ring gave to his namesake, whom he had freed from the spell, his sister Ingeborg, and his father's kingdom to look after. But he himself stayed with his father-in-law, the king, and had half the kingdom while he lived, and the whole of it after his death.
Okay, well, I kind of floundered around that one. Hopefully I'll be able to fix it in editing. Let me see how long the next story is, although it's already 10:46. Let's see, Swarner. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We got 11 stories left in this book. I'll go ahead and pause for tonight. That might give me 2 or 3 weeks left. I'm not sure which book I'd go to after that. Because I did get the, I would say new book, but old book today that was Arabian Nights Entertainment. Or I could go ahead and go on to the next fairy book. No, I need to get more of the fairy books because I don't have many left of this set. I need to get more. Which I don't really have the money for. So I'm going to have to switch fairy tales for a while. Which would really kind of suck. But anyway. Thank everyone for coming in. Let's see who might be on streaming. I know a few people are on streaming already. Or again, if anyone has any suggestions, feel free to toss them up. Is anyone here? Feel free to emote spam right now. I'm kind of curious if you're here. And thank you for the hydrates, Guilty, because I was doing some drinking while you were doing this. So. And honestly, the thought of the salt in the porridge was making me thirsty. Because apparently trolls don't like salty porridge. Imagine that. But that was an Icelandic tale. I wonder which island that would be. Because if it was an island off of Iceland... Huh. I don't know. What are the chances of there being two princes named Ring? Oh well. Check real quick. Anyone doing reading fun right now? So my suggested channels right now, I've got Dusk, Baffy, and Evie. Do I have anyone on reading fund? Let's see. Oh, I've got 2 people live right now. That's me and one other. Look. Neff is reading Summer Night. It's one of the ones that I snuck in and did a fall after they were streaming. I got some cats lurking in there too. Let's see, anyone have any suggestions? You want to hear another reader, or do you want to... See, Deska's doing art. Evie is doing Elder Scrolls Online. Yeah, I may raid Evie. I don't get to raid her very often. Not sure how much longer they can be on, but Evie does a lot, so we will raid Evie. Again, thank you everyone for coming in. I just have to remember what Evie's current name is. I think Evie is going to let Dreadloop. Yep, Dreadloop. And I spelled it right, so. Again, thank you everyone for coming by. Lurking and listening to hear me attempt reading. And I will hopefully see you around next time. So, have a good night, everyone.